One of the most common reasons parents stay in a toxic relationship is because of the kids. I'm sure this played a huge role in why my parents never divorced. But before I go any further today, I want to give a strong trigger warning for themes of suicide. Please be sensitive to yourself and skip this episode if listening to such content is harmful for your mental health. And I can't be sure that I can get through this without being really emotional. So let's get ready. At 15, when I wasn't trying to earn the role of the golden child, which rarely happened, or working my way back out of being a scapegoat once again, I was often my mom's emotional crutch. It had been like an unbroken generational curse for us. She'd often tell me how she mothered her mother while I was mothering her. A few years earlier, my dad bought a dairy farm. To give you a sense of how messed up my family was, it had been my dad's lifelong dream to buy his grandmother's farm. That would have been my great-grandmother. And he had worked it for years, knew the land, the buildings, and the basics of the business. And I'm sure it had been a dream of my great-grandmother's as well, since he had lived with her for years and had helped her out. But she had remarried before she passed away, and her new husband sold it to the neighbor of ours. Hurt and angry, my dad bought a larger farm just a few miles away. And so when I was 10, my entire family moved to this farm and started working the hard life of dairy farming. So fast forward those 5 years, another one of my dad's business partnerships of farming was failing. The family was facing a mountainous debt that was moving us towards bankruptcy, and we were stressed beyond belief. In the middle of all that, my dad's mental health was collapsing. So it was late, and I was getting ready for school as a sophomore the next day when my mom pulled me into her and dad's bedroom. I remember that it felt odd because she was pacing and wringing her hands. "I need you to pray with me," she said. That startled me. I wasn't for sure what's going on, so I sat down on a rocking chair and just stared at her, waiting for what was going to come next. "We need to pray," she said. "Your dad's walking the cornfields right now with a handgun, trying to work up the courage to kill himself." I was dumbstruck. My mouth dried up, my ears started ringing, and all I could hear was the sound of my thumping heart as I tried to think of what to say next. The rest of that night was a blur. I don't remember if we prayed. I don't even know how I got back to my bedroom and how I fell asleep. But somehow, I managed to wake up the next morning and head off to school and had to focus on schoolwork. And in the middle of all that, I figured out that my dad was still alive because he had come home and he was milking the cows when I left for school. The primary job of a 15-year-old is to figure out geometry, to learn how to write a good essay, to take typing so they can get ready for college. They're supposed to learn how to drive a car, how to make and keep friends, and how to flirt with the opposite sex, for me to flirt with boys. But for me, I was preoccupied with what was happening at home, with questions like, is my dad going to be still alive? Is the farm going to make it? Will I have a roof over my head come spring? Sometimes my mom would speak of divorcing him, and when she'd bring it up, I would silently scream in my head, "Please, please, please leave, Mom." But I didn't say anything because really this was adult business and none of it was mine, and all of it was much too much for a 15-year-old. And remember, this was the 1970s when divorce was still a social stigma and women are just gaining access to being able to have their own bank accounts. Yet somehow I knew that if she would leave, things would become less chaotic and less unpredictable, and that I would feel safer. But they never did. My dad quit farming a year later, but the stress that surrounded him never went away. If you're new here, I'm Dr. Kerry Kerr McAvoy, a licensed mental health clinician, and this is another episode of Toxic Love, where we've been dissecting a pathological love relationship. I know Personally, it is never easy to leave a narcissistic relationship for lots of complicated reasons. All the gaslighting and deception and manipulation makes it really hard for victims to see the problem. They end up thinking that the issue is the relationship, not that their partner has personality deficits. Because narcissists are great at using smoke and mirror to confuse and control their victims. This becomes even more of a complicated issue when there are children involved. So I want to talk about 7 most common reasons why parents stay in a toxic relationship, as well as some things to consider if this describes you. The first concern, the emotional impact. Yes, there's plenty of research on the negative outcomes of divorce on children, making this a legitimate issue, because no parent wants to knowingly harm their children. But ask yourself which is worse. Living with a stressed out mom or dad who's being emotionally abused, or living with a single parent who's recovering and healing. It's not well researched which is harder on children, whether living with a narcissistic parent or living in a divorced single family home or single parent home. But my suspicion is that living with a parent who is emotionally in a better place and providing a safer environment is the better option. Because children can't focus on mastering the necessary skills for life when they're trying to cope with a stressful or threatening home situation. So if this is your concern for your children's welfare, ask yourself, what needs to happen for your children to gain that kind of important and necessary stability so they can focus on their own development? Concern number 2, manipulation. Many parents worry that their children are vulnerable to being turned against them by the toxic parent. And yes, I know, the smear campaign often starts at home with those who are the closest to us. And toxic people have no qualms about playing to their children's sympathy or planting false or exaggerated concerns as a way to poison them against the other parent. And we don't want to see our kids caught in the crosshairs of the bad relationship going wrong, or to have them being used as a pawn. If this is your concern for your children, it is a real risk. Your best defense is to stay emotionally available, to answer their questions as truthful as possible, yet age appropriate, while not running down the other parent. I know that's a hard line to walk. Consider getting outside help to find the right things to say in order to keep the lines of communication open with you and your kids. But avoiding their concerns and pretending nothing bad is happening, pretending this isn't not going on, only runs the risks of alienating them, making them feel like they're all on their own. Number 3, potential abuse. Then there's this worry that if we're not there all the time, then our children are going to get it worse because we can't be there during their visits. And yes, that's also another legitimate concern. Unfortunately, if there's a divorce, children will end up spending time alone with this toxic parent and may run the risk of being emotionally abused or manipulated. But you can do your best to stand in the gap by helping them navigate this tricky and challenging situation. The bigger question for you is, which is worse? Having you emotionally stressed out, living in that situation, trying to shield them 100% of the time, which you're not at your best, or the better version of you with the percentage of time that you get them single because you're healing and getting more confident and feeling better. And I know there's no easy answer to this very difficult question. Number 4, impact on a child's development. We don't know what the long-term effects of exposure of a narcissistic parent will have on children. This is a real concern because if they're around them 100% of the time, they're being modeled bad behavior, and what they see is informing them of what to expect in our intimate relationship. Many of us end up staying thinking that as the healthier parent, we can have an effect that will offset that bad example. But is it really enough? Are you modeling good mental health practices in that situation? Too often we tell ourselves that being there is better than not being there. But what we fail to remember is that we've also been acclimated to a toxic condition and we're losing perspective. If this is your concern about getting a divorce, seek outside opinion from someone that you trust who can give it to you straight. Maybe it's time for you and your children to see a therapist for a professional opinion. You may be surprised by what you hear. Number 5, the instability created by divorce. Change is never easy, and narcissistic parents will make sure that getting a divorce is sheer hell. Some parents fear that that shakeup is worse on the child's psyche than the impact of living with a narcissist. If this is your concern, remind yourself that toxic people bring with them loads of chaos, confusion, and drama. Your life is already unstable. The upheaval of a divorce is a temporary one that will eventually settle down into a more consistent routine. Concern number 6, financial security. Yes, parents who are together earn more, have better income than divorced parents. Your children will experience a change in their lifestyle, most likely, if you are to get a divorce. But ask yourself what's more important, your child's well-being or living in a comfortable home. There's no price tag that we can put on feeling secure. Number 7, we fear the loss of psychological support if we get a divorce. Many parents fear that they're going to have to go it alone if they get a divorce because they think they're going to lose the support of their friends and family. And unfortunately, a lot of abuse survivors discover their support system isn't as healthy as they thought. But there's good news because there's growing online support. And if this is your concern, you and your children aren't alone. Please continue to reach out to me and others like me online and seek local resources. Remember that you can join my Toxic Free Relationship Club where you get expert professional advice and 24/7 help from other community members. You are not alone, and you are stronger than you think you are, and so are your children. No one likes to put our kids through unnecessary change and pain, and divorce is never an easy decision. But your children are more resilient than you think. I don't know what my life would look like if my mom had left. I had learned to cope by wandering off and spending hours alone or mentally to check out. I had learned to ignore my gut instinct of danger because life often felt unsafe and risky. And it's taken me years to begin to prioritize my need over others because I had learned the unhealthy skill of managing the emotional volatility of toxic parents by being pleasing and compliant. And these are just some of the baggage I'm struggling with because of growing up in a toxic family. But it doesn't need to be this way for your children. You have time to create a different outcome for them. So please don't waste it. If today's topic has hit home, consider what steps you could take now to make a difference for your children. And please like this episode and subscribe to this channel for more helpful content. And don't forget to turn on notifications so you don't miss the next video. Check out last week's when I discussed the challenges of leaving, and come back next week when I get into why being discarded hurts so damn much. Hey, big hugs, stay strong and safe.